2010, I encountered an unfinished 1927 film script by Kazimir Malevich titled Artistic and Scientific Film, Painting and Architectural Concerns, Approaching the New Plastic Architectural System. I became intrigued about why the script was left unfinished and determined to imagine the final stages of its development. The complexity of the task prompted me to write a dissertation on Malevich's worldview. I immersed myself into the ideas that influenced the artist, and as a result, proposed the finale for Malevich's only cinematic work. The script consists of a short introductory text and a series of instructions for how to depict the transformation of the black square. The latter is Malevich's most iconic painting that represents the building block of visual reality, the royal infant, as the artist called it, from which the rest of suprematist shapes evolve. Through rotation, the square becomes a circle, and through division, the square, echoing processes of a biological cell, becomes a cross, until eventually, through multiple steps of evolution, the square reaches the stage of a three-dimensional architecton, a pre-architectural construction, or blind architecture, as Malevich called it. Here on the script, you see how the square number 2 is the development of the square into a circle through rotation. And on the left, there is some ideas about how the square can multiply itself and turn into a cross. In summary, my vision of the script's development was influenced by Malevich's interest in four-dimensional geometry, evolutionary theories, and set theory, implications of which came to prominence at the time and eventually led to the development of computing. Since the script demonstrated an acute interest in the questions of space, witnessed in the transformation of shapes from the 2 to 3 dimensions, using VR to materialize the project seemed like an excellent choice. What you see is a test in which four-dimensional architecton is embedded into a desert landscape with textures created from photographs of Craquelure on Malevich's paintings. Malevich the mystic considered desert and its synonyms, abyss and void, as terms that describe an experience of total unity and oneness, only possible when, in a state of non-objectivity, distinctions between subject and object are erased. In fact, the other goal of suprematism was to rebuild perception apparatus of human beings in such a way as to enable them to perceive the world as it really is, as, quote, milk without the milk bottle, unquote. When experiencing this VR scene, I realized that the medium's benefits in experiencing abstractions, such as my project based on Malevich's work, go beyond convincing presentation of a three-dimensional space. I began to consider that there are other reasons for VR lending itself so well to the forms of abstraction intended for facilitating a sensation of unity and oneness with the world and grasping the knowledge of the underlying characteristics of reality. Using James Billington's term, I will call this type of art Promethean, signifying a conviction in the possibility of completely transforming the world. My main focus in this discussion will be the art of Kazimir Malevich and that of the style artists who, independently from each other, developed comparable philosophical art systems. In what follows, I will outline a number of qualities that both Promethean abstract art and VR medium share, with the aim of proposing that it is due to these shared properties that non-figurative, non-narrative experiences should be explored in the immersive environment of VR with an increased interest from artistic and scientific communities. The property that comes to mind among the very first is the immaterial nature of virtual reality. The notion of immateriality fits well with the ideas of Malevich, who, like other artists of his period, questioned the validity of Newtonian physics and, inspired by the science of electromagnetism, began to consider reality as a continuous process of the transformation of energy. This shift in worldviews is well described in the works of Marshall McLuhan, Renato Barria, and R. Bruce Elder, who, among the other ideas, discuss the effects of technological paradigms on imagination, creative expression, and perception of reality. In some artists' work, the change in worldview stimulated a conviction that matter is an accustomed way of seeing, which, through appropriate training, can be overcome, revealing reality as it is. Consider this statement by a Nobel Prize winning scientist and the founder of the discipline of physical chemistry, Wilhelm Ostwald, whose ideas inspired many early 20th century artists. Quote, while energy becomes clear and more confirmed as a reality, the claims of matter disappear and matter is left without any rights except those of tradition. Unquote. In dialogue with Ostwald, Malevich writes, quote, there may be evidence that there is no matter, as I am proving with the entirety of my writing. But science has proved the existence of energy, which constitutes what we call the body. Unquote. Transported into the space of virtual reality, our bodies and the entirety of space lose their illusory material form while retaining the energetic principles of construction, becoming ones and zeros, the presence and absence of electric current, which make computing and with it virtual reality possible. Rejecting existence of matter and perceiving the world as flux, where objects have no boundaries and energies that comprise bodies interpenetrate each other, relates to the process philosophy of Henri Bergson and the later work of Alfred North Whitehead. Indeed, Bergson's ideas were incredibly popular among early 20th century artists. Virtual reality as a medium is processual, always inviting to live and relive experiences that are unique like moments in time. Bergson writes that through suppressing the physiological instincts responsible for making us perceive outlines and edges of objects, it is possible to achieve the state in which, quote, the individuality of the body is reabsorbed in the universal interaction, which without doubt is reality itself, unquote. I contend that VR can be used to create experiences of reality that overcome all apparent divisions and restore awareness of unity, the goal of the Promethean abstract art. This is one of the reasons the four-dimensional model of Architecton in my VR scene does not have boundaries, inviting playful exploration of the formal configurations its immaterial body creates in the process of immersion in the experience. Perceiving the totality of experience as oneness with the universe was described in the 1961 book titled On Having No Head, Zen and the Rediscovery of the Obvious, written by an English philosopher and mystic, Douglas Harding. In this book, Harding describes his realization that he had no head, an insight accompanied by the sensation of infinitely extending present moment, which erased the concepts of past and present. Harding writes, quote, it took me no time at all to notice that this nothing, this hole where a head should have been, was no ordinary vacancy, no mere nothing. On the contrary, it was very much occupied. It was a vast emptiness, vastly filled, and nothing that found room for everything, room for grass, trees, shadowy distant hills, and far above them snow peaks, like a row of angular clouds riding the blue sky. I had lost a head and gained the world. Achieving mystical experience of losing one's sense of boundary and merging one's consciousness in a state of the freed nothing was the pillar of Malevich's philosophy. The style artists developed visual language stripped of any traces of individualism, which Brusselder describes as conveying, quote, the wondrous, indeed sublime feeling of an all-pervasive order, unquote. I contend that a comparable liberating experience is also a property of VR that relies on perceptual replacement of one's head with the vast space of virtual reality delivered via the technology of the headset. The fact that we see no nose or sides of our face when wearing a headset numbly decapitates us, symbolically removing the seat of logical reasoning that holds our conventional approaches to living and experiencing, freeing our minds and headless bodies to feel oneness with the world. In his chapter, From Perspective to All Unity or the Narrative of Virtual Cosmology, German philosopher Thorstein Botz-Bornstein asked the question whether VR represents the idea of a non-physical space enabling humans to grasp the world as a whole. Botz-Bornstein brings to the discussion the ideas of the German philosopher Jean Gebser, who in his 1949 book, The Ever-Present Origin, predicts that at the end of the 20th century, the concept of reality will undergo radical transformations, which Gebser associates with the changes in the concept of linear perspective, that for the thinker is synonymous with logocentrism. The triad of thinkers who influenced my ideas on art and technology, McLuhan, Berry, and Elder, identify a linear perspective as belonging to the symbolic order of the mechanical world of Newton, and characterized by linearity, grid-like structure, and aspiration to arrest the flow of life. The lack of perspective, which can be witnessed in Malevich's and Mondrian's paintings, is symptomatic of the electromagnetic paradigm and is expressed in art forms that emphasize processual and energetic nature of reality. Based on Gebser's notion of aperspectival conception of space, Botz-Bernstein considers VR to be technology that overcame the limiting effects of perspective by internalizing all exterior points of view, bringing to mind reverse perspective in painting. Immersive perspective in VR relies on stereoscopy, perceptually infinite space of the scene, and ability to interact and move around the virtual world freely, resulting in a decentralized experience that negates the possibility of a single point of view. A perspectival conception of space, according to Gebser, allows to grasp reality as integral and grants, quote, an intensive awareness of the world's transparency, a perceiving of the world as truth, unquote. To perceive the transparency of the visible physical reality and to do away with the restrictive logic of linear perspective were also the aspirations of Promethean artists, defining VR as the ultimate medium to experience their artistic philosophies. The aspiration to curb subjectivism and repress the cult of personality responsible for the fractured experience of reality led suprematists and the style artists to create visual vocabulary based on impersonal shapes and colors, free from expression of the artist's feelings. According to the key thinkers of these movements, this artistic method revealed the underlying nature of reality. Here lies yet another property that VR shares with Promethean abstract art, a possibility to witness what is beneath the visible, found in a feature contained in most software for building virtual worlds and creating 3D graphics. In his book Software Takes Command, media theorist Lev Malevich identified view control, or the abilities to switch between many different views and kinds of views of the same information, as one of the most fundamental and radical new techniques for working with information and media available to us today. This function of controlling the view and showing different renditions of virtual objects, such as the wireframe view in the modeling software Blender, for example, can be understood in relation to Promethean artists' aspiration to unveil the wireframe of the physical reality. View control of reality in VR, developing software, is conceptually akin to sensing the underlying order of reality in Malevich's and Mondrian's abstractions. This insight that aspirations of early 20th century artists have become manifested in the functionalities of creative software is not surprising if we take into account that according to Lev Manovich, Alan Kay and his team's development of personal dynamic media, which introduced the use of computers as tools for artists, was the next stage of the avant-garde project. Promethean artists epitomize the original military meaning of the term avant-garde, advance guard, a small number of strong army corps that marches ahead to bind and engage an enemy, securing the time and space necessary for the strategic operations of the main army. Long before McLuhan identified this role of art, their artworks functioned as early warning systems, preparing the world for the zenith of an electrotechnic age. Through their art, historical avant-garde artists simulated possible futures. VR, by definition, is a reality simulating medium. The shared properties between VR and Promethean abstract art attest to the unique compatibility between this medium and the possibility to explore the associated art philosophies. Thank you for your attention.